So the question is, the Microsoft deal with Activision Blizzard, what does this mean for Stadia and cloud gaming as a whole? And I definitely want to touch on this because there's a lot of stuff. There was a lot of eye-opening quotes that came from this this acquisition in regards to cloud gaming, and one of them specifically cited, one of these quotes here specifically cited Google and Amazon and even Meta, Facebook. And to me, this was really eye-opening. So in my last video, I talked about how there was this quote from the CEO that said that we're investing deeply in world-class content, community, and cloud to usher in a new era of gaming that puts players and creators first and making gaming safe, inclusive, and accessible. That's one thing that I mentioned in my last video. Again, the word cloud was mentioned. Then there was this actual verbal quote. This wasn't from an actual magazine, or not a magazine, but an article. It wasn't on a website. This was actually verbally Phil Spencer, and I paraphrase this, saying the Activision Blizzard deal will especially help them as they jump into new geographical markets and mobile-first economies, and mention how cloud gaming was a focal point of that. As I talk about this every single week, getting into new countries where they don't ever dream of really playing on consoles. They don't have the fastest, most beautiful gaming PC. They have none of that. Gaming is consumed completely through their mobile phones. I have my phone right here, their mobile phones, and that is where a lot of money is. There's a lot of money there, and it's completely untapped in these markets. That is why any cloud service right now is not going away anytime soon. You're not going to see Google step out of it because there's just too much money potential. Those were the quotes that I talked about in my last video. There was another one here, and let me see if I can find it. It says, this was actually pulled from their official thing that they actually wrote when they talked about the acquisition. It says, the fantastic franchises across Activision Blizzard will also accelerate our plans for cloud gaming, allowing more people in more places around the world to participate in the Xbox community using phones, tablets, laptops, and other devices you already own. Activision Blizzard games are enjoyed on a variety of platforms, and we plan to continue to support those communities moving forward. This is now 3 quotes I pulled, and I bet more than likely that a lot of the talking heads, a lot of the YouTubers, the people who cover this stuff, probably kind of glanced over the cloud gaming stuff, and they just mostly focused on what this means now. But if you're noticing a trend. There was something here that was talked about. This was in a separate interview from I think the Wall Street Journal. He was getting interviewed by the Washington Post. He said, Nintendo's not going to do anything that damages gaming in the long run because that's the business they're in. Sony is the same, and I trust them. Valve's the same way. So he's saying he's got full confidence in what they're doing in gaming. So he's saying they're not going to damage. Here's the interesting quote. He goes, when we look at other big tech competitors for Microsoft, he mentions Google has search and Chrome. Amazon has shopping. Facebook has social. And all these are large-scale consumer businesses. The discussion we've had internally where those things are important to those other tech companies for how many consumers they reach, gaming can be that for us. So right there, he mentioned, and he hadn't said this in years. Let me go ahead and pull this back up. He hadn't said this in years, but he had said back, I think it was, 2019, that one of the biggest competitors for them wasn't necessarily Sony and all these guys. It was actually Google. And did he say anything other than Google? I don't remember, and I'm sure I can pull up the quote right now. But he had said that Google were the ones he was worried about. Now, it's interesting, that quote he mentioned right there, because it was almost in a different context. He said damaging, as in Google or Amazon or any of these could damage the market. And I don't know exactly what he means. He didn't go into specifics of that. And I'd love to someone else to ask him a follow-up question. But the fact that he sits there and he says that they're almost essentially threats tells you how this thing is going to continue to evolve in the years ahead, guys. I have some more information I wanted to pull up. According to Newzoo, 23.7 million users participated in cloud gaming and came with about 1.6 billion in revenue in 2021. And then they're projecting the number is going to jump to 6.53 billion in 2024, and that essentially it's going to be about 3% of the whole gaming market. So right now I think we're barely at like 1-2% where cloud gaming is just that like that's it. It's not very big right now. So that's why you're kind of seeing a lot of stuff be at a snail's pace. That's also why you're seeing Xbox Cloud Gaming and Xbox themselves, they're investing in cloud gaming. They're going to have, I think eventually they're going to end up having, because I know it's in development, a cloud only game. They're already working on, you know, things to get access to the TV. They're in this very much, and they're very much looking into the future. That quote he said from years ago, where they're more worried about Google, and then he essentially reiterates that again, tells you that this thing is going to go way beyond what it is right now. And one of those ways it's going to happen is through cloud gaming. And then the fact that they mentioned cloud gaming several times tells you that cloud gaming is going to be huge, especially when it reaches these other markets, and it's going to take off big time. So essentially the Activision Blizzard deal is literally just this, like, the way I'm looking at it is like this chess piece, and it's just one thing that they acquired, and it'll help them in the future, and it's certainly going to make some noise. And the way that I think this is really going to play out is that this is going to end up looking essentially, and I've talked about this for weeks now, it's going to look like the way we see streaming services right now. We see Netflix, we see Disney Plus, we see things like Hulu, and then we see things like HBO Max, all these different streaming services for consuming movies and TV shows. You're going to see a lot of the same things here, and that's just the way it's going to end up being, because going into those markets, one thing that I've been told from people who are currently in those markets who are awaiting cloud gaming, more than likely they're not going to buy $60 games, because that's not what they do at all. They're used to paying for games in a certain way, and maybe eventually you'll get them used to it and you'll present it more. But really, one of the things that will translate really well is putting your game in a huge library, kind of like a Netflix, essentially, kind of like, you know, Disney Plus. And then, you know, having those exclusive IPs will certainly help be more attractive for Xbox. But right now, building up your library, building up your platform, doing all that is just as good, in my opinion, right now, as getting the games, which other services are still doing. You're seeing GeForce Now do it. You're seeing Amazon still build up the library. All of it's at a snail's pace. But that little thing I just told you here at the end, where essentially gaming's only going to jump to 3% in 2024, that's 2 years from now. So what does that tell you? That right now, if you're an exclusive cloud gamer, this is still going to be a slow build up. It's probably going to be like 8 years, maybe 7 years before we start to see that 3 to jump to 6, then maybe jump to 12%, and then go from there. And so at that point, you'll definitely see, and I know nobody wants to hear this, but I'm just kind of telling you the way I'm seeing it, the way it's projecting, the way it's looking. So right now, when someone goes, Stadia needs to make a move now, or it needs to happen now, it's really like a lot of what's happening now is more for way down the future, because nothing that GeForce Now does, or nothing that Amazon Luna does, or any of these services will really make that big of a dent. And right now, the one that is kind of ahead in really making those big moves is Xbox, because they have this entire big ecosystem they've been building for decades. So ultimately, my thought on this is that in the short term, it literally, the Activision Blizzard deal literally means nothing. This is such a long game being played. Bill saying what he says tells you that they're trying their best to suppress Google, suppress Luna. It's all a long-term thing right now, and that is where it'll ultimately make its effect. In the short term, it really does mean nothing. Even within the next 2-3 years, even when Xbox Cloud Gaming starts featuring Blizzard games, I don't foresee Amazon or Google or being anything sort of huge or already competing with Sony or PlayStation. So ultimately, it means nothing, at least in the short term. Going back to the Sunny Talk, I absolutely see that Phil Spencer really feels like they are just massive threats. And I'd love to know the context of what he means by what he said, because it almost sounded like he was insinuating that Google and Amazon and Meta, Facebook, are going to somehow kill and hurt gaming in some way, shape, or form. And I wonder if it's more of him, and this is just me processing right now, where it's like he's good with a Sony competition and he's good with a Nintendo competition, but he doesn't want to see these other ones because they'll do something within gaming that will just disrupt it. And so it's interesting that he even mentioned how Google has search and has Chrome. And it's so true. It's so true how powerful Google is. And if they really wanted to make some insane noise with Stadia, they absolutely can. But I think they looked at it and said, you know what? We launched this thing and we went all in on the launch. It didn't go the way we wanted. And then what we've now seen is that cloud gaming is just still something that just it's fighting a perception problem too. And videos like we just saw with Digital Foundry showcasing how essentially cloud is literally just as good as a local Xbox Series X, Stadia included. Little stuff like that is how you start to change the minds of a lot of the gamers right now that are actually in this ecosystem of gaming as it is. But when we talk about the future of it, it really is right now for cloud gaming. It really is getting into, the big thing is getting into other markets. And he literally, Phil Spencer verbally literally said that. Right now, I hope Google is paying attention to every word he's saying and going, okay, and Amazon as well, we need to step up. You know, we need to step up. So, I mean, let me give you even another example of something where these companies know right now that going all in at this very moment probably isn't the smartest thing, at least not at this very moment. Amazon and Luna. I mean, why isn't the New World on Luna? I don't know why exactly. But obviously, what we can conclude is it wasn't that big a deal to get it on there because it probably would not have made much of a difference. It wouldn't. Maybe they would have gotten some new users for sure, but it wouldn't have been this mind-blowing, explosive amount of users. So whatever resources it would have taken to get New World on Luna, they concluded it wasn't worth it at this very moment. I'm sure it'll eventually be on there. But I mean, that tells you right there how this is just a slow burn when even one of the services, Amazon Luna, won't even get one of their exclusives on their own service. That's just kind of what I'm trying to tell you guys. This is just such a slow burn. And it's frustrating for me. It's frustrating for you guys because you guys want to see the best games right away. I want to see the best games. You know, I want to see all the same stuff you guys want to see. I'm just kind of reading the tea leaves and I'm reading what's happening everywhere, and it's just gonna be slow. All right, quickly before I end this, I wanted to reiterate the quote that I didn't have pulled up earlier, and the quote is, this was from Phil Spencer back in I think 2020. He says, when you talk about Nintendo and Sony, we have a ton of respect for them, but we see Amazon and Google as the main competitors going forward. And that's not to disrespect Nintendo and Sony, but the traditional gaming companies are somewhat out of position. So he's talking, of course, about Sony and Nintendo. And he says, I guess they could try to recreate Azure, but we've invested tens of billions of dollars in cloud over the years. I don't want to be in a fight over format wars with those guys while Amazon and Google are focusing on how to get gaming to 7 billion people around the world. Ultimately, that's the goal. And doing a quick Google search, I saw that there is currently right now 2.2 billion mobile gamers right now. So if you can see what's going on, if you can see underlining what the actual headline of all this is, it isn't about Sony, which is what a lot of the talking heads are going to talk about, which they've been talking about the past week. It's about Google, it's about Amazon, and it's about the threats that they present. That is why I keep trying to tell you guys, I'm absolutely not worried about whatever Google's doing, whatever Amazon's doing right now. Is it giving us the games we want to see at the moment? No, but this is just such a slow burn ultimately, and reaching all these markets with the power that Amazon and Google have, and even Facebook, is incredible. And so wanted to bring that quote back up, and then obviously the current quotes from earlier that I talked about, and you guys can see there's all this smoke, and that's for a reason. Guys, thank you for watching this. I know this was a little bit long. I do this every weekend. I stream. Check out my streams, as this was pulled from my live stream, and this is where I get some intimate talk, and I get to talk to you guys directly. So with that, guys, I'm Sunny, and as always, I'll see you guys in the clouds.